Now, so I'm sorry, it's a very dry presentation, but it's based on a paper that I just wrote, and so mostly what I'm going to take you through is this study and some of the findings of this study. It is very different from usually the kind of presentations that happen on this group, but just bear with me. So and Yeah, okay, let me start. So basically the study is called Evaluating Effects of Mobile Locative Media on Embodied Engagement with Cultural Heritage Sites. And through the presentation, I'll take you why I did study, how I did it, what were some of the key findings, and very briefly on the discussion. I will not extend the discussion a lot. So basically, what is locative media? These are generic. It's a generic term to cover all applications that deliver geotagged information on your mobile phone, which may also include applications like Google Maps. Uh, and what is embodied engagement? It is a way of engaging with world primarily through body as a mean, and its movement, uh, and a focus is more on senses like touch, smell. So you shift away from that primacy of visual engagement with things. Uh, okay, so within the tourism sector, tourism research, the people have again and again talked about that, tourism is not about just looking at objects, but it is about interacting with things. And in that interaction, it gives individual a opportunity to bring in their own personal biography, past knowledges, to make meaning in their experience of that heritage site. So therefore, then the focus has to shift from information based engagement to a more active, immersive engagement with the heritage site. And then people have talked about the benefits of such engagements, largely being long-term memories, leading to a reflection and personal imagination. So uh, within interaction design or HCI, this has inspired some researchers to uh, create interactive artifacts that can lead to such embodied interactions at heritage sites. So they've used approaches like tangible interactions, which is primarily you have objects, you interact with objects rather than screen. And these, in the process of this engagement, narratives are delivered to you. So, for example, in one particular project, they took a site of a cemetery, and then they embedded a lot of these tangible artifacts, and as visitors moved around, they could pull out stories about the history of that cemetery. Similarly, at another site, people tried creating interactive media installations, uh, or handheld projectors. Uh, they did report that it supported embodied engagement, emotional engagement, and led to some amount of critical thinking. But at the same time, these approaches have limitations because each site requires, um, if you are installing something permanently into a site, then it requires a deeper understanding of the socio-cultural and physical aspects of the site. And then, of course, if you are installing things outside, or if you are doing any kind of installation, there's a concern of cost and maintenance. So therefore, while these are good approaches, they have limitations for mass deployment. At this, uh, sorry, okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I
Yes.
can.
Okay, okay, okay. Uh, Okay, so now within the heritage sector, the application of mobile phone based application has been rapidly growing over the last 20 years, and they're particularly useful for outdoor exploration, as users can take their own devices and they can freely move around. And so interaction designers or developers have explored approaches like pervasive gaming, storytelling, or personalized content delivery to increase the engagement during uh, these explorations. Then there have been other studies on effects of content, or people are trying to understand what users want and how technology can be adapted better. uh, and then another group has looked at how, there is concern about distraction caused by screen. So they have looked at how we can use audio and haptic feedback to create interactions that doesn't require uh, visual attention. But they have not essentially looked at how then we can engage people into an active engagement, embodied engagement with the heritage site. So that is why, that's the main motivation of this study, that while it is known that, use of phone affects the behavior of individual with their surrounding, uh, people have not really tried to understand that and then design applications that can then overcome that limitation. So that is where essentially this study is situated, and the intention is to then see what are the opportunities to enable immersion and interaction with physical and material aspects of the site. uh, for the study, we selected the town that I live in, because it's already a heritage town, and we took a part of street in this town and developed an application for that. And then we had 21 university students who took this heritage walk. Basically, as participants walked, they could the app would detect their location, and if they were near a heritage location, it would give them some information about that heritage location. So you can see how the interface looked and how the information was delivered during the walk. um, so the data was collected in form of video recordings of those walks. So we followed the participants, collected video recorded their walks. We did interviews. We also collected their drawings, and we did a memory test 7 days after the walk. So uh, basically we wanted so the purpose of the videos was to understand how the behavior with device affects behavior with space or in space. uh, so we created detailed annotations of the videos and then applied thematic analysis on those annotations, and we were looking at their gaze, their behavior with device, and use of space, which essentially means how they are moving in the space, where they are stopping, how long they are stopping in the space. So basically, we found that we had made a choice in terms of offering the interface during the walk was just a camera interface. If you can see the right top image, so there was nothing but just a camera view with a viewfinder graphic in landscape orientation. And we found that, that led a lot of people to hold the camera in a landscape orientation in front of their bodies. And a lot of participants also ended up using the phone to scan or frame their surroundings. uh, so that was an interesting observation. But when it actually came to exploring the street, we found that most participants did not observe, visually explore the street. They were essentially looking straight ahead, and just to support their navigation through the street. Their focus was from moving from one side to another side. Uh, and they just regularly kept glancing on the screen, even though screen was not showing any specific information when they were walking between the sides. Um, so, in terms of that walking behavior, it was largely purposive walking rather than a exploratory walking. Um, when it came to engagement with the sites itself, we found that participants generally, like at an average, spent like 20 seconds at each site. They Most of them did not move forward or turn towards the site. They essentially, if they were stopping, they essentially just passed two or three glances towards the site. And this is a huge opportunity loss, because they are in presence of a physical heritage site, but they're not using that opportunity to connect with it, and to enhance their own experience of history at that point of time. So uh, during the interview, we were trying to understand that how did they experience their use of device, what was their feeling of the activity, and how would they describe their overall experience. So most of the participants who used the phone to sort of frame and scan things found it fun. They reported it was very engaging for them or enjoyable for them. But at the same time, they said that it could be very tiring if the walk was longer. And the participants who did not do these inactive behaviors, they said that, why do you hold the phone during the walk? Why not just keep it in the pocket? uh, and some of them felt self-conscious because they were being noticed by passers-by, just because they were looking at phone multiple times and they were looking at something in the surroundings. So that sort of behavior attracted attention, and that generated self-consciousness amongst the participants. When we asked them about their experience of the surrounding, they felt, so they so there were those who just focused on the architectural aspect of the street, and they didn't sort of focus on the social surrounding. So they felt isolated from the social dimension of the street. And then there were those who just paid attention to the phone, or they just looked at things from afar, and they felt that their engagement was limited to observation. They didn't interact with anything. So in totality, there was this sense of isolation and disconnectedness from the surrounding. The overall experience was largely reported as, information driven or information centric. Whatever, whether it was excitement or satisfaction, everything came from the fact that they learned something new. So the central aspect was the information that they got during the walk. When we looked at the drawings, we were essentially looking at how they represented space, how they represented themselves, to understand their awareness of themselves in the space. Uh, and there we found that uh, most participants did not depict themselves in any specific way in relation to space. Uh, for example, if you look at the middle drawing, he's drawn the space, but it's just generic representation. There is no specific activity or action towards the site. Um a lot of people did not depict their relative position to the site, and then most people did not represent their orientation towards the site. So this was there was a very little awareness of their own bodily orientation with the space. Just when looking at representation of space, we found that A lot of people used 2D methods to represent space rather than three-dimensional immersive representation of space. Uh, Scale and details were very loosely depicted. Uh, Very few people represented any sensorial information, and only six people represented passers-by. Most people didn't represent passers-by in their drawing. And when we looked at the memory test, which we did 7 days after the walk, we basically asked participants to, recall all the sites and related information. We found that people at an average remembered six locations and related information only related to three locations. But an interesting observation was that if for the participants who walked slower, their recall increased. They recalled more locations and more related information. And when we asked them what was their method of recalling this information, they said that essentially they did this sort of a mental walk again through the street. So so you know so from these we sort of then figured out that perhaps inactive interactions may not be the best approach because uh, those might be tiring and generate a lot of self-consciousness. Uh, but an approach that we thought that could be explored was choreographing the walk. And what I mean by choreographing the walk is that um, we found that some of our participants described that using this kind of application essentially affected the flow of their walk, and other participants said that for them interaction would be to stop to move close to the building. So there was this sort of a walking pattern that e- that we thought would lead to a more interactive and engaged experience. And so that is what we mean that use the uh, use this application to actually create choreographic sort of engagement through the walk. And another thing that was interesting was to think about that would be interesting is to think about extrovert interactions. So essentially when people are using phone, they're sort of embedded into their screen, and that sort of creates which is known as cocoon around them. So it would be interesting to think about breaking these cocoons. Yeah, that's about it. That's the end of my presentation.